It's that time again, folks. Time to explore the adventures of the mighty B9 robot and his human pets. Yep, we return to Lost in Space with a lesson in humility from Dr. Smith, or for Dr. Smith. He ends up colluding with an escaped burglar who's being pursued by a bullyish cop and two Wookiees who sound like TIE fighters. I kid you not. The males of the Robinson family, minus Dr. Smith, of course, have left for their own adventure, so we get to see the women in the spotlight, and they avail themselves admirably, standing up to the police officer, being nice to the burglar because he's not a jerk, and I assume cooperating because they know he might take them as hostages if they try to resist. So they do the smart thing and just give him some food, a change of clothes, a shower, and have him leave. But like I said, he ends up colluding with Dr. Smith, and in the end, Smith betrays him to the cop, and we get to see a bit of his sinister side. Something that we haven't seen since the first season, actually. Well, the first few episodes, I should say. I think it's still the first season. Anyway, the first episodes of the season is what I was trying to say. This is my curse for not scripting this stuff out. Anyway, the good doctor finds, thanks to the unwitting assistance from the burglar, a ring which grants power to whoever puts it on. In this case, a King Midas touch, only with platinum. Unfortunately, what always happens, and Dr. Smith faces a grim death via a combination of starvation, dehydration, and madness. Because while Penny finds him wallowing in self-pity, she tries to get him to come back, regardless of the danger, and gets turned into a statue. Ultimately, Smith goes from being sinister to being totally pathetic and begging forgiveness, even sacrificing his own well-being mentally, if only Penny could remain, or could be restored to humanity. And ultimately, he learns a bit of a lesson. He gets rid of the ring. Why is it always a magic ring? That's been done to death, although it is the mid-60s, so it's probably never been done before in this point in time. Ultimately, the doctor avows to turn over a new leaf, but thankfully, he's still the same Dr. Smith, maybe a little nicer. The next adventure involves the Robinson men and Major West, who end up in a cavern after nearly getting swallowed by a volcano. And due to the robot being fed fairy tales by Dr. Smith, when Will finds a young girl asleep, Sleeping Beauty style, the robot prompts him to kiss her, which wakes her up and wakes up her minions. Turns out she's the leader of an evil empire with a huge army, and they plan to take over the universe. Of course! Luckily, West and Robinson Sr. are able to resist long enough to get away once an earthquake hits. And rather than give up her throne, the princess decides to go back to sleep. And as far as the Robinsons and Smith know, well, the Robinsons and West know, they're still down there, waiting for some hapless idiot to come wake up the princess and unleash an army over all the universe. Our next adventure involves a space pod that's capable of breaking the universe. Will accidentally gets taken for a ride in the vehicle and comes back with a super genius intellect, which leaves him feeling alienated from the rest of the family because at this point, they're all animals compared to him, mentally. Smith tries to get Will to get him to pilot the ship to Earth because he wants to go home. I mean, what's the point? He's probably going to face criminal charges for what he did to the Jupiter, too, if he ever gets to Earth, without the Robinsons to vouch that he's served his time, basically, by being their unwitting guest. Anyway, Smith tries to use the pod, but it ages him to Methuselah level. Then, when the owner of the pod returns in his own pod, and he looks like kind of like a cross between Creature from the Black Lagoon and the demon hero from DC Comics. Etrigan, I believe his name is. Basically, the guy looks like a big lizard. It's a pretty good costume, by the way. Not perfect. I mean, the mouth barely moves, but still. Ultimately, Will convinces the alien, after he's gone back in the pod and reversed his intelligence, so now that he's back to normal, not stupid, just normal, the alien decides to show mercy to Smith and turn him back to normal. And calls him a dandy. Basically, this segment of the show involves punishing Smith and making him learn lessons. And he sort of does learn lessons, but he's still Dr. Smith. Finally, in the season finale, something really bad happens. The leader of the Robinson family and everyone's favorite dad gets possessed by the spirit of an ancient warlord whose mask has some sort of neurotransfer capabilities, which turn Robinson Sr. against the family. He's extremely harsh to Dr. Smith. Even Smith doesn't deserve what he goes through this time. And he even badmouths the rest of the family, threatening them, belittling them, not treating them like human beings. It's horrible. But on the plus side, he does develop a way to generate fuel for their ship, so they are considerably closer to leaving the planet pre-Planus. Unfortunately, Will sees right through the deception that the person that they're talking to is actually Robinson Sr. So, after donning the mask, the warlord, running around in Robinson's flesh, tries to kill Will by throwing him down a basically bottomless pit. Goes right to the core of the planet. Luckily, thanks to the power of love, Robinson Sr. manages to rip the mask off and throw it down to the chasm, which causes the quote-unquote spirit to be destroyed as well. And the day was saved. Now, seeing as I'm viewing these episodes from the DVD box set of the whole Lost in Space series, the disc that I'm doing the review on right now also has the unaired pilot of Lost in Space, where the Jupiter 2 is referred to as the Gemini 12. And there is no robot, there is no Dr. Smith, but there are a ton of special effects. A meteor shower, which is the original cause of the Robinson's troubles. A crash, a cyclops, a lightning storm, an earthquake in an ancient temple, and even a scene in the ocean where the family ends up being spied on afterwards by a couple of Talosians who wandered from the Star Trek set. So there's that. Anyway, lots of footage from this unaired pilot end up in the series, basically being cannibalized for the first few episodes, which was a good idea. But since it was a pilot and not the first episode, it was never seen until much, much later. When I first saw this, it was very confusing because I thought this was the original first episode, but I couldn't understand why the ship was called the Gemini 12. Then it was later I found out that it was a proving ground for the effects, not the actual start of the show. And with that, we come to the end of the first season of Lost in Space. When next we meet, things get much more colorful. Until then, this is Mr. J signing out and reminding you, Irwin Allen's work might be old and in some cases very, very silly, but the man really was a genius. Especially when it came to anti-heroes like Smith and comedy duos like Smith and the Robot.